Welcome to the Phuble podcast, the podcast where we talk about all financial markets around the world. I'm Philemon Viennes, and this podcast is sponsored by Phuble, the social networking platform for any and all investors. This week we are in Austria, so we will be discussing Austrian Indices, the Austrian Economy, and Austrian government bonds. The major indices here in Austria are all on the Vienna Stock Exchange, and they include the ATX, the ATX 5, the ATX FIN, the ATX BI, and the ATX CPS. The ATX is the major stock index here in Austria, and that tracks the blue chip stocks, which are the large market cap stocks on the Vienna Stock Exchange. The ATX 5 is a capitalized weighted price index, and that essentially consists of the 5 stocks with the highest weighting in the ATX. So the ATX 5 is based directly off of the ATX. The ATX FIN index is comprised of stocks made up of the financial sector in the prime market of the Vienna Stock Exchange. Currently, the ATX FIN has 11 stocks. The ATX BI is an index that is made up of stocks in the basic industry sector in the prime market on the Vienna Stock Exchange. It currently includes 8 securities that consists of stocks within the oil, gas, and metal industries, just to name a few. The ATX CPS is the consumer products and service index for Austria. It is comprised of 3 stocks. One is an automotive supplier, one is a food company, and one is a catering company. All the indices that I mentioned are capitalized weighted, and all of them have been relatively stagnant this year and have a relatively downward trend. Switching to Austrian government bonds, the 2, 5, 10, and 15-year yields are all negative. The 30-year yield is positive but is floating down toward a negative yield. There is an inversion with the short-term bonds here in Austria. There is no inversion with the short-term versus long-term bonds. All yields are floating downward. Now, why are the major stock indices here stagnant and declining, and why are yields declining? Well, unemployment for September was at 6.7%. Unemployment for August was also at 6.7%. Unemployment has been decreasing the past year, but 6.7% is still a lot of people who are unemployed. Retail sales in August were down negative 1.3% month over month. The retail sales from August were up 0.3% year over year. That decline in retail sales still shows an economic slowdown comparing August to July. GDP growth for quarter 2 was at 0.3%. Quarter over quarter. In quarter 1, it was at 0.5% quarter over quarter. So there is a slight decline in GDP. Year over year, GDP growth is at 1.5% for Q2. The major signals that are probably making investors nervous are the business confidence and the consumer confidence numbers for September. Business confidence was at a negative 0.48 rating. Consumer confidence was at a negative 3.7 rating for September. GDP is set to grow around 500 billion USD in 2019 for full year 2019. That compares at 455.74 billion in 2018, and that those numbers are in US dollars, not in euros. There seems to be an economic slowdown here in Austria. Like I mentioned before, all the indices are relatively stagnant, and they're actually floating down toward their year lows, and that unemployment number is not healthy at all. So based off of all these factors here in Austria, there seems to be a slowdown in economic activity. That is all for this week's episode of the Phuble podcast. Thank you for watching, and happy investing.